So yeah, I thought all parents did drugs until one day I realized that wasn't a fact. That was just something that happened in my house, in my chaotic world. You see, we grew this summers in the Cape, and in the Cape, I would spend my summers on the beach. Why? Because there was cottages on the beach, and they would get rented out, like Airbnbs nowadays. And there was families, and those families had kids. And so I would go and make friends with these kids because I was an only child for a long time. So I was lonely. My house, there was no other kids but me, and there was chaos. And I wasn't going to be around that. So I would go make friends with these kids. And when I would make friends with them, I would eventually end up spending the days with them and their friends, with other friends and other friends. And so their parents would invite me over and I would have lunch and then I would have dinner. And as an adult, I coined the term cottage hopper because eventually that's what I ended up doing. What I would spend my summers would be is cottage hopping. I would wake up in the morning and I would go to the cottage of the person I had made friends with, and I would do that every time with every new person I had met, and I would spend the day at their house until they finally would tell me, "Okay, it's getting late. It's time for you to go home now." And I would go home. Sometimes it would be, before sunset, or sometimes it would be late in the evening until they were like, your parents are going to get worried. It's time for you to go. But I realized, parents, not all parents do drugs. There's not chaos in all these families. These families were normal. These families played board games. These families played card games. These families watched, family oriented shows together on TV. They prepared meals together. They had chores. They set the table. They would sit together. They would eat together and have conversations and interact with each other as a family. I didn't have that at my house. Shit, I don't even think we owned a board game in the house on the Cape. As far as I can remember, we didn't. Now, I had some nannies who had some board games. That stories are for later in this series, but I'll tell you what, because those nannies were crazier and so maybe a little bit more chaotic than my parents. But anywho, um, so there was a lot of things that a lot of people don't realize. The one blessing I will say about all that, because it was very dangerous if you think about it, because if my kids were have done it now, I would be like, oh my God. I was never violated. Never touched inappropriately, never done anything that shouldn't have been done to a child. And so that is, I think that was God protection over me, and in those moments, because he realized I needed that protection and I needed that normalcy in that moment. So I was blessed in that aspect. So I give thanks to God for that. Now I will say, there was a lot of inappropriate things I experienced in my life. For instance, before I was even, I'm maybe 7, pushing it 8, but mostly 7. I went to go see the movie The Omen at a theater. I saw the movie Tommy by The Who. If you know, you know. If you don't know, go look up the movie Tommy. You'll understand why that's not age appropriate. Um, I've seen the Rocky Horror Show before I should have ever seen that movie. I think my kids were in high school before I introduced them into the Rocky Horror Show, because it's a cult classic. You have to see it. If you don't know, then you don't know. Uh, and there's a lot of cute things that I also have stories about. I had a beautiful dollhouse that George bought me that I had up at my playhouse. My playhouse was in a loft, by the way. I had to use a ladder to get up to it. And one day we'll discuss about my playhouse. But I have stories, tons of stories. Like for instance, I can tell you, George was a major player in the smuggling back with the cartel, and there's people that I met, people that I know, people that you only have heard about or learned about in documentaries on different platforms. So I can tell you stories about all these different famous people. Someone made a comment on one of my videos about, or I read a book about someone. Well, that was their narrative, but you know what? I lived the life. I know exactly what happened during those times. People need to sell a book, just like Blow. The movie Blow, it was a narrative that was written as a screenplay. So just because it was on the movie doesn't mean that that's exactly what happened. So to always keep that in mind. Um, Again, I hope you all decide that you want to continue following along with me and that you'll follow. And let me know, in my comments, if there was anything that you always thought was normal and you found out one day that it just wasn't normal. But and comment about it if you want to. And please make sure you just follow. Have a good one. Good night.